I'm going to read to you, in answer to that accusation, the accusation that I'm a conspiracy theorist, that I'm crazy, that I'm pretending to be a psychic or know something that experts don't. Because I get those emails and all those tweets all the time. What do you know? Right? How come you're right and Nobel Prize laureate economists say the bill is a good thing? I'm going to read to you a letter. I want you to listen to this and understand the context of it. This is a letter to the United States Army High Command. And I'm reading from its text exactly. Quote unquote. Japan knows full well that the United States will probably enter the next war with the methods and the weapons of our former war. It also knows full well that the defense of the Hawaiian group is based on the island of Oahu and not the defense of the whole group. An attack will come from the air. The Japanese bombardment will be about 100 airships organized into 4 squadrons of 25 airships each. The objectives for the attack are Ford Island, the Navy fuel depots, water supply at Honolulu and Schofield Field, Schofield Barracks Airdrome and troop establishments, our naval submarine station, and the city and wharves of Honolulu. The attack will be launched as follows: a bombardment and then an attack to be made at Ford Island primarily at 7:30 in the morning. Subsequently, also attacks will be made at Clark Field in the Philippines at 10:40. Japanese pursuit and aviation will meet bombardment over Clark Field, preceded by squadrons, one at 3,000 feet to 2,000 feet from the southeast and with the sun at their back, one at 5,000 feet to the north, and one at 10,000 feet from the west. Should U.S. pursuit be destroyed or fail to appear, the airdrome itself will be attacked with machine guns. The Japanese Air Force will then carry out a systematic siege of the Philippine Islands against Corregidor. The letter was written in 1925, almost 20 years before the actual attack of Pearl Harbor, which followed that plan almost to the letter, almost to the minute. The person that wrote that letter to his commanding officers was then a Colonel Billy Mitchell, who was fighting at the time for the development of the United States Air Force. Because at that time, the Army and the Navy were the military. There was no Air Force. And he felt, no, we need to divide our military force into 3 different groups with a centralized command, no Army and no Navy, just one major Department of Defense, and to provide for a national air defense squadron. And he says, if we don't, that attack will happen. Now, today, we look at this and go, wow, Billy Mitchell really knew what he was talking about, right? Billy Mitchell was court-martialed for that letter. He was stripped of his command and reduced in rank because he dared to defy his superior officers who said to him, what do you know? You're just a colonel. You have a lot of awards of valor and gallantry. The demonstration that you provided on aerial bombardment was ineffective because he had done so in a few years beforehand. You know nothing about Army tactics. You know nothing about the Navy. You're just a flyer who was very successful in World War I. What do you know? He died in 1936, stripped of his command and most of his influence. Subsequently, after the attack on December 7th, 1941, which happened to the letter, his medals were restored against the objections of the military, even in 1942, who refused to admit that they could be wrong. Even in light of the actual attack, they refused to admit it. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt asked to be commissioned a special congressional gold medal to replace a Medal of Honor, which should have been awarded to Billy Mitchell. In fact, his record was not exonerated until 2005. And even then, there are still critics because he stepped out of command. He did not go through the chain of command, and he made public attacks on the leadership who he said was guilty of treasonous misconduct. They tried to destroy him and did so. The same accusation that's made against people and conservatives today for ringing the alarm bell of the dangers of this economic policy and this presidency and that party. They were told, "You're a conspiracy theorist, Billy Mitchell. We have to apologize to Japan." That was the call in 1925. Woodrow Wilson wanted him drummed out of the military because he didn't obey orders. He went outside the command. He talked to reporters. And he said that the leadership of the American military was suspect. He was accused of what? Treasonous conduct. And interestingly enough, a fact of that trial, which most people don't know, there were a group of admirals and generals who sat in judgment of Billy Mitchell, which convicted him of court-martial. There was one not guilty vote. Do you know who that not guilty vote came from? Douglas MacArthur, who was a junior officer at the time and was upset at the verdict. That's what this is today. No matter how bad things are, no matter how bad things get, no matter what happens, no matter how many conspiracy theorists get proven true time and time again, as I've said, what's the difference between a conspiracy theorist and the actual facts? About 12 weeks. They will never admit they're wrong. Biden will never admit it's wrong. He said today, it's not really a recession. They won't admit they're wrong, even in light of the kind of evidence of the attack of Pearl Harbor. And the context of that letter, the wording of it was exactly, they still wouldn't admit it. That's what you're dealing with when you deal with bureaucracy, authority, and government bureaucrats. And that's what we're dealing with President Biden and the people around him. And the economists. They know full well they're wrong. They just want you to not believe it. They want you to believe that it's not a recession. They know full well what it is. So did those Army generals and Navy generals. They knew fucking well what was going to happen. They watched it happen before their eyes in 1941. And yet in 1942, FDR had to override them and give Billy Mitchell a special congressional gold medal, even though he couldn't get, even the President of the United States couldn't get Mitchell completely exonerated. That's how onerous and invasive and dangerous big government is. Now let's talk about the actual bill. We'll be right back.